we are going to take you now to that Department of Justice press conference where they're breaking down these numerous arrests in illegal sports betting and poker game schemes of the NBA. Let's listen.
Newark Special Agent in charge of Homeland Security, Michael McCarty, Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch, Chief of Detectives Joseph Kenny, and the Executive Director of the Waterfront Commission, Phoebe Sorrell. I'm now going to turn the podium over to FBI Director Kash Patel.
Good morning. Today we are here in New York to announce a historic arrest across a wide-sweeping criminal enterprise that envelops both the NBA and La Cosa Nostra. The men and women up here standing with me represent a small portion of the leadership team that brought profound justice in an era that needed it more than any. I'll just highlight some of the details in the case and the FBI work, and then you'll hear from the others. But as you now know, individuals such as Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and Terry Rozier were taken into custody today, former, current NBA players and coaches. What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years. The FBI led a coordinated takedown across 11 states to arrest over 30 individuals today responsible for this case, which is very much ongoing. Not only did we crack into the fraud that these perpetrators committed on the grand stage of the NBA, but we also entered and executed a system of justice against La Cosa Nostra to include the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchesi crime families. And you'll hear more about those details today. The charges and the arrests that were taken down across this country range from wire fraud, money laundering, extortion, robbery, illegal gambling. This FBI will leave no room for any perpetrator of crime across this country. You hear a lot about our work of defending the homeland and crushing violent crime. Well, this work is also representative of a colossal portion of the FBI's mandate to keep America safe and to keep our entertainment industry fair and secure. The men and women that are standing up here today worked tireless hours, days, months, and years. And the fraud is mind-boggling. It's not hundreds of dollars. It's not thousands of dollars. It's not tens of thousands of dollars. It's not even millions of dollars. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars in fraud and theft and robbery across a multi-year investigation. And we could not have done it without our interagency partners that are before us today. The NYPD, HSI, and teams of law enforcement officials from around the country made this day possible. It takes a team to bring this kind of justice, sweeping justice, into the halls of the United States courtrooms, where our brave United States attorney has led this prosecution. It takes courageous prosecutors to stand before you and say, we will not allow this kind of illicit activity to happen, not only at the national sporting level, but also where it hides in La Cosa Nostra. And when these two collided together, they perpetrated a fraud that is historic in terms of not just money, but the scheme and the deceit that they utilize to steal and swindle people from money, to include crypto fraud. This is an operation that showcases to you that under President Trump's administration, there is no room for any type of criminal behavior, be it on the world's largest stage or in the back rooms of tiny parlors where card games are being played. We are proud to stand here today with the men and women of the FBI and this legal team. And to the United States Attorney, I just want to thank you personally for taking the time to display the work that the media is about to hear about today in detail. As I said, it does take courageous prosecutors, but it takes a courageous United States Attorney to bring this case, because we are going to take heat for it. But we don't shy away in this administration. We don't say no. What we do is we bring the results across the finish line. We bring them to the public. We bring you accountability. And yes, they will have their day in court, and you will hear the evidence through the court system exclusively. We will not deny anyone of due process. And that's the brilliance of this system. That's the brilliance of this administration. Everyone will be held to account. So with that, I turn it over to United States Attorney Nosella. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Patel. To be clear, we're announcing today indictments in two major cases, both involving fraud. One involves sports betting, and the other involves illegal gambling, very specifically rigged poker games. The first indictment involves 6 defendants who are alleged to have participated in one of the most brazen sports corruption schemes since online sports betting became widely legalized in the United States. This scheme is an insider sports betting conspiracy that exploited confidential information about National Basketball Association athletes and teams. The second indictment involves 31 defendants alleged to have participated in a nationwide scheme to rig illegal poker games. These defendants, which include former professional athletes, used high-tech cheating technology to steal millions of dollars from victims in underground poker games that were secretly fixed. The games in the New York area were backed by the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese crime families of La Cosa Nostra. While the cases are separate, there are 3 overlapping defendants charged in both cases: Damon Jones, Eric Ernest, and Shane Hennon. The indictments in these cases contain only allegations, and the defendants are presumed innocent until they are proven guilty in a court of law. But my message to the defendants who've been rounded up today is this: your winning streak has ended. Your luck has run out. Violating the law is a losing proposition, and you can bet on that. First, I would like to talk about United States versus Ernest, the NBA basketball gambling case. The defendants in this case are Eric Ernest, Marvez Farley, Shane Hennon, De Niro Laster, Damon Jones, a former NBA player and coach, and Terry Rozier, a current NBA player. Other co-conspirators were previously charged for their roles in the scheme, including former NBA player Jontay Porter. Between December 2022 and March 2024, these defendants perpetrated a scheme to defraud by betting on inside, non-public information about NBA athletes and teams. The non-public information included when specific players would be sitting out future games, or when they would pull themselves out early for purported injuries or illnesses. They relied on corrupt individuals, including Jones and Rozier. They also misused information obtained through long-standing friendships that they had with NBA players and coaches. And in at least one instance, they got their information by threatening a current player, Porter, because of his pre-existing gambling debts. Defendants used this non-public information to place hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent bets, mostly in the form of prop bets on individual player performance. The bets were placed through online sports books and also in person at casinos. The defendants relied on a network of straw bettors to place the maximum amount of bets to increase their potential profits. Most of these bets succeeded, and the intended losses were in the millions of dollars. The defendants then laundered their illegal winnings in various ways: peer-to-peer platforms, bank wires, and simple cash exchanges. The indictment details specific examples where the defendants profited from illegal gambling and illegal betting on various NBA games about the performance of players on, among other things, the Charlotte Hornets, the Portland Trail Blazers, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Toronto Rangers. Each defendant in the NBA basketball gambling case has been charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Now, I would like to turn to the other case, United States versus Aiello, the rigged poker game case. Beginning as early as 2019, the defendants in this case orchestrated a scheme to use wireless cheating technology to run rigged poker games across the United States, including in the Hamptons, Las Vegas, Miami, and Manhattan. The scheme targeted victims known as, quote, fish, who were often lured to participate in these rigged games by the chance to play alongside former professional athletes who were known as, quote, face cards. The so-called face cards included the defendant Chauncey Billups, who at the time of the scheme was a former NBA player and is currently the head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, and also Damon Jones, a former NBA player and coach. What the victims, the fish, didn't know is that everybody else at the poker game, from the dealer to the players, including the face cards, were in on the scam. Once the game was underway, the defendants fleeced the victims out of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars per game. The defendants used a variety of very sophisticated cheating technologies, some of which were provided by other defendants in exchange for a share of the profits from the scheme. For example, they used off-the-shelf shuffling machines that had been secretly altered in order to read the cards in the deck, predict which player at the table had the best poker hand, and relay that information to an off-site operator. The off-site operator sent the information via cell phone back to a co-conspirator at the table, and that person at the table was known as the quarterback. The quarterback then signaled secretly the information he had received from others to others at the table, and together they used that information in order to win their games and to cheat the victims. Defendants used other cheating technologies such as poker chip tray analyzers, which is a poker chip tray that secretly reads cards using a hidden camera, special contact lenses or eyeglasses that could read pre-marked cards, and an X-ray table that could read cards face down on the table. What you see depicted on a screen right now is an example of the X-ray table that reveals the cards. Although they are face down on the table, they can be read because of the X-ray technology. The mafia, specifically members and associates of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Genovese organized crime families, had pre-existing control over non-rigged, illegal poker games around New York City. As a result, they also became...
All right, you've been watching the Justice Department, along with the FBI Director Kash Patel there, bringing the breaking news to us, which is that Blazers head coach Chauncey Billups and Miami Heat player Terry Rozier have been arrested on gambling investigations. There are a number of people who've been arrested, more than 24. Let's bring back CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen. So Jake, if our audience is just joining us right now with this breaking news, help them understand what is being talked about here and what these charges are.
Well, that's right, Vlad. Federal prosecutors and FBI Director Kash Patel have unveiled 2 different indictments that are connected through one former player, Damon Jones, and a number of other associates. In one, which you just heard them talking about, 3 different mob families in New York and New York State were running rigged poker games throughout the country, out on the Hamptons in New York City and other places. How they did that was special contact lenses, X-ray tables, a number of other cameras and means of basically bringing in players to play with tens and thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars and rig the games against them. As you just heard, everyone from the card dealer to people in the room to people playing them all had rigged these games against these people. Involved in that specific probe is Portland Trail Blazers coach Chauncey Billups. Separately from this, Terry Rozier, a Miami Heat guard on the NBA team down in Florida, has been charged with, alongside Damon Jones, again another and former NBA player, of participating in wire fraud and conspiracy to defraud people based on prop bets. They said he had, and among other people, been faking injuries, threatening players. Another player, Jonte Porter, who had been caught with illegally gambling a couple of years ago. This investigation, Kash Patel, into both of these went on for a number of years, but as we see with the ease of online betting. They pointed to that first slate of bets because it's so easy to do this, using insider information to quickly make bets, not just in Las Vegas or places where there's casinos and sports books, but also from your phone. Rozier was involved in these specific bets, rigging games, faking injuries, a number of things like that. And Vlad, again, going back to this massive mob tie involvement in this Chauncey Billups case. Again, he's a legendary NBA player who moved on to be a coach for the Portland Trailblazers. There were a number of teams, 5 different teams, and players on those teams were involved in either being threatened or pushed for information about their playing status, federal prosecutors have said.
So, Jake, just before we go to Anna Schecter, I just want to understand something. When the feds say that there were injuries faked, does that mean that players were coerced into pretending to have fake injuries in games, which would allow people to place these bets? Is that what's being alleged here?
It certainly sounded like it, or in addition to that, potentially these players started to play a game and rig their stat lines to maybe have a certain number of turnovers, throw the ball away at a critical moment in the game. That is definitely what was alleged in this. We will read the indictment as soon as it is unsealed. Everything currently is still under seal, so all we have are the names and the charges. But Chauncey Billups charged with felony charges in this mob tie investigation, and then Terry Rozier charged with conspiracy to defraud people and commit wire fraud as part of that investigation. So the NBA certainly caught up in this massive, wide-ranging national organized raid this morning by the FBI and this charging. We have not heard from the FBI or Director Adam Silver yet as of this time, and we're waiting on statements from these different teams, the Portland Trailblazers, the Miami Heat, of what they know, in addition to these 5 other teams, which players were allegedly threatened for information on them from these teams. Some of these charges, Vlad, are about extortion. Some of them are part of this illegal gambling ring by just being there and involved. Certainly, having 3 different mob families, you heard them reference the Cosa Nostra, the Bonanno family, and others being involved, certainly raises the stakes for the seriousness of these crimes and how much further it potentially could go or could have gone. Thinking about the tens and thousands, hundreds of thousands, and tens of millions of dollars you heard Kash Patel say there was at stake. Every card of hands in poker and every bet in these bets. They said most of these bets were successful. Obviously, when you rig the bets, it will be same for these poker games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've begun to understand what the repercussions will be yet, Jake, specifically as it relates to the league. And as you say, we haven't heard from Adam Silver yet, but my guess is that there will be repercussions that we cannot even imagine from where we are right now, because this news is just breaking. Let's, Jake, stand by. Let's bring in CBS News Crime and Public Safety Senior Coordinating Producer, Anna Schecter, who's also following this story. Anna, so blast from the past. I suspect that a lot of people perhaps would have thought that La Cosa Nostra was no longer a thing, but then you heard the FBI director there, Kash Patel, referencing the Lucchese families and the Colombo families and the Bonanno families. So clearly they have not gone away. They perhaps just are not as visual. You don't see them on the scene the way you did during the John Gotti era. So what happens next here?
Well, you're absolutely right, Vlad. It's kind of like going into a Godfather movie with this cast of characters, the cities involved, New York City, Miami, Los Angeles. This was a multi-state operation run by these old crime families known to law enforcement for decades. And what we just heard the prosecutor in the Eastern District of New York say is that his team had been monitoring the illegal gambling operations that these families have been running for years. But once it got to this level, this highly sophisticated orchestration with special contact lenses with designed to give individuals the ability to read the victims' cards, X-ray tables, all of that, that's a massive operation. And once the feds were able to get inside that and really gather enough evidence to charge more than 30 people, that's when this case really blew up, and they felt that they were ready to come down with these charges, including felony charges. So what happens next? The indictment has already been filed. Charges are filed. We know that a current player, former players have been arrested. More arrests will likely come to light today, maybe into tomorrow, in multiple states. And then obviously we're going to wait until the first preliminary hearing is set, where these defendants will be read their charges. Eventually, we will get to hear their pleas. And so the justice system will sort of take its course. But right now, we are still all digesting this huge news of this massive conspiracy of illegal gambling in the NBA. With victims losing, as Kash Patel said, Jake Rosen just mentioned, tens of millions of dollars.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, of course, the most famous case of illegal betting around basketball was way back in 1951, that point shaving scheme in college basketball, and La Cosa Nostra was allegedly involved in that. Anna Schecter, thank you very much. Stand by. I want to bring in Bryan Kalbrosky. He's joining us now. He's a senior NBA writer for USA Today's For the Win. Bryan, I'm just trying to get a sense of what this will mean for the NBA. I know we're waiting to hear from Adam Silver, but just give us that perspective of how big of a deal this potentially is.
Yeah, I mean, this is truly a heartbreaking situation for the NBA right now. They just had an incredible opening stretch of basketball games on their new TV rights deal from Wednesday to Thursday, including, so many incredible highlights, but this is going to be the massive talking point, the major story as the league continues to investigate what happened here. There was already a league investigation that did potentially clear Rozier. He was eligible to play in his opening game last night, but did not play. Head coach Eric Spoelstra, who was actually just named the Olympics Team USA head coach, did not play Rozier last night. Not sure if he was aware of the fact that this was going to come out this morning or not. But the reality is that whether or not the league found them guilty, the federal government is the one that decides the actual legal ramifications here. And if these players are found guilty by the federal government, there could be, serious legal ramifications, but we have no idea how long they could potentially be facing. And while these players might maintain their innocence right now, I know Terry Rozier's lawyers already said, that Rozier is innocent, and that potentially Billups' thing wasn't necessarily related to sports gambling. These are really serious crimes and just a real stain on the league as they're trying to push for the back to basketball narrative and be able to have the game be the story. And this is obviously a much bigger story than that. And it's just, it's really tough look.
Yeah, my producer, Eric Berlin, just told me that the feds are calling this Operation Royal Flush. And it makes me think, Bryan, that sports betting has been legal in recent years. And as you know, leagues like the NBA have become partners with gambling companies. It feels as if the sport has become tainted by this, specifically these charges that are being announced right now. And the question that I have is, are we looking at a potentially going back and looking at some games and revisiting whether those games were actually, if there was anything crooked about them? I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. And again, I don't gamble. I'm not in that world at all. But it sounds like what they're saying is that if there were injuries faked, or if a certain number of fouls were committed on purpose because they were taking direction from underworld guidance, that you could have something like that. What would that look like if that were to be the case?
Yeah, absolutely. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has already said that gambling is the cardinal sin of the NBA and would be, the highest enforced punishment. We already had Chauncey Porter arrested in 2024. He was a very low-level player, and it did not have the same impact that a player like Terry Rozier, who's been a really high-level player, has been in the conversation for Sixth Man of the Year, played a huge role for the Boston Celtics for several years, and is currently an active member on the Miami Heat, making over $20 million a year, who doesn't have the same financial incentive as a lower paid player like Chauncey Porter. And realistically, they have already investigated Terry Rozier's involvement with this from betting his unders potentially from January 2023 when he was on the Charlotte Hornets. This was already flagged and has been an ongoing investigation for several years. And, the NBA is already going through a different investigation right now related to Kawhi Leonard, which is completely separate from this. But there are questions related to salary cap circumvention as well that have absolutely called into play the integrity of the league. And if the integrity of the league is called into question, that's a huge problem for sports fans everywhere. If the integrity of the league no longer looks the way that people expect it to be, where the outcome is unpredictable, and instead it's more like the WWE, where it's more scripted, everything is hanging overhead. And with operations like FanDuel and other things getting more involved as key sponsors for major networks and for the league itself, it's hard to say where this could potentially head beyond a huge fallout that would really change the landscape of professional sports, not just in the NBA, but across the board, especially considering the college level now has NIL payments and several other ways to make money beyond what we used to see. So this would affect sports at all levels of play.
All right, Bryan Kalbrosky, thank you very much for your insight. I also want to thank Jake Rosen and Anna Schecter for your reporting, guys. I know you're staying on top of the story. There's probably a lot more to come, specifically as it relates to the league, because like you, I'm waiting for Adam Silver, the league commissioner, to make a statement. We're going to continue to follow these developments and this investigation throughout the day, and dare I say, throughout the course of the week.